So good morning, welcome. Again, my name is Tim Whiting. I'm the Instructional Designer with Texas Wesleyan University. I appreciate you all coming to our session here today from heck yes to heck no, supporting students through thoughtful AI policy design. And so let's go ahead and really quick, I am part of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning here at Texas Wesleyan, and our goal is to support our instructors, really just overall. And so that's our main overall goal. One thing that I just want to give you a little bit of overview about how we kind of got to this point here and how we got into basically this presentation here. So as everyone has been experiencing, obviously, and that's why we're here, is because of with AI, with all the changes been going on, especially in higher education, we've just had to really look at, what's our role with this. Over the last year, our university has set up an AI policy as far as overview of the policy for overall. But then we had to look at what is our instructors going to be, what are their roles with that. So we've been working on that over the last year and a half. And one thing that we really developed is that we have a spectrum of heck no, I don't want to use it at all the way to heck yes, we're going to use it in every case possible. So, and we have developed some resources. I want to be able to share those resources for you, but be able to kind of walk you through that whole process as far as just kind of going from your very beginning of establishing so we're going to start today. But while we're talking about establishing a policy, you have to start with you yourself. So let's just go ahead and throw into here. This is an official survey. You shall not pass. That within your course that you don't want, that you don't think that AI has a particular place here? Or are you kind of the Ron Swanson? I love some Ron Swanson here. Are you more about the minimalist, only in a support role? AI tool and strictly, and then I put it back up and I only use it for when I need to use it. Or are you Doc Brown over here? You're a maximalist. In other words, AI for everything. I love that opening session that we just had. I think it was real poignant in the discussion she was having as far as the relationships in AI and all. And is this where you're kind of headed? You're really full force with AI, that you really want to use it for every type of aspect. All right, so as we look at this, we're going to look at what, like I said, you kind of start with you, kind of what your mindset is, because that's going to affect your policy, which is going to affect what's in your course, which obviously is going to affect your students. And so then let's also look at what others say as well. So we're looking at some statistics here. And obviously, when you look, AI is moving so fast, so these numbers change rapidly. And so, but the main thing I want to look at is just the overall thought, because to tell you the truth, a lot of these numbers, if anything, they're probably higher now, right? And so we're even just looking at the fact that 79% of company leaders believe adopting AI is necessary to remain competitive. And so that's what companies want. Companies want AI. They use AI, all right? And they're going to probably be using it even more as it progresses. By the way, feel free in the chat if you want to throw in just some of your thoughts in here as far as some of these statistics, what stands out to you, what shocks you. We're just going to go over a few of these in particular. But so as we said, companies use it or companies want it, right? And then 58% of college students feel they lack sufficient AI literacy. But look in particular down here in the right-hand corner, the 86% of students report using AI in their studies, right? So not only do companies want it, but students use it. And then what about our effect on higher education? So look over here on the right-hand side, 99% of surveyed US colleges agree that AI will be central to their competitiveness. But then this number here, 61%, what's funny is that it's actually a 2025 number. Just last year, we saw statistics at 48%. So that's already increased within a year of higher education faculty that now use AI in some sort of way within their teaching, efficiency, those type of things. So companies want it, right? Students use it, and higher education has to respond to it. Now, something that's not on here is I want to give you some personal I guess, research, investigation, whatever you want to call it, as I've been working with our different schools on how they're approaching this with their faculty. And I've worked with the School of Arts and Sciences, worked with the business school in particular. And one thing that came up in our conversations, and it's stuck in the back of my head, and it really should, is that, yeah, we can sit here in higher ed and say, hey, this is how they're using it out there in the real world, et cetera. But do we really know that? Do we really know how they use that? So I really do encourage you that you have those conversations and you find out exactly what they're using. So I started reaching out to people that I knew. And a good friend of mine is actually in cybersecurity he audits banks in their cybersecurity system. But so I just called him and I said, hey, how do you use AI? And of course, his response back was, what's AI, right? So just kind of making a point that, hey, it's not just the LLMs, it's not just the chatbots, those type of things. There's so many different aspects. Copilot's now integrated within all the Microsoft programs, those type of things. So many different aspects to that. So the next question I asked him is, I said, what do you as a company, as you're hiring? So he actually hires interns. He hires people fresh out of college to be on his team. So he's having interaction with these people coming straight fresh into the workforce. And I said, what do you want them to know about AI? And what do you want them to have as far as AI skills? And he broke it down into something that it's just simple. He said, first of all, I want them to know the risk of AI, know about AI, know the risk, and how to mitigate those risks. And he said, the next thing is, I want them to, and this is going to shock y'all, I want them to know how to read an AI policy that a company has and how to follow that policy. Makes total sense. And that's how we can come in as educators. And that's why establishing your policy, as you might be thinking, well, this is just something to make sure I can get through the semester with the students with AI. But you're actually setting a tone, a growth mindset as your students are taking this and just the knowledge of just what they've experienced in your class, and they're going to learn on that. All right. So again, let's look at this. Why an AI policy for your course? So for one, they already established that it's something that's going to benefit them when they go into the real world. But let's look at a couple other pieces of that as well. That is all into what I'm going to go with as far as AI literacy. And when we think of AI literacy, we might be thinking, oh, you're asking me to actually have a full lesson and a course on how to use AI and all those type of things. No, when we're looking at AI literacy, your policy can be part of your AI literacy. I think back to when I first got into education a couple years back, and it was the beginning of the whole internet boom, and how we had to teach students that you're no longer going to the library, no longer going to your, the encyclopedia collection that your grandma has in her basement to do your research, but you're actually having to critically think about the research that you see online. And is that just Bubba's innovation making up stuff, or is that a legitimate source? Well, same thing here with AI. Within our courses, we are teaching them how to have AI literacy. And one way you do that is establishing a policy and teach them how to follow that policy. And with that policy, you're using that policy as a guide. So at the end of this presentation, there are some resources that you're more welcome to view. And one of them is a podcast. It's Thinking Higher Education's podcast. And Danny Liu said that, you use what you do in your class as a guide, not the cops, right? So your AI policy can be that guide. You set up the guardrails. The idea of guardrails isn't they're going to hit the guardrails and have to move back. The idea is to keep them straight without hitting the guardrails, right? And so your AI policy, if you're writing it with an idea of growth mindset, you are setting up those guardrails to be beneficial to your students. As I was working with the School of Business, they started thinking, hey, what if we had an AI policy for the School of Business? Because they really wanted to integrate them. Their leaders want AI to be everything integrated in every course. And so they thought about establishing a policy for the School of Business. Now, I'll talk about that more later, actually. But one thing, as they were having discussions, as I was listening in, and we did a little breakout type session in their discussions, one thing I noticed is that they started saying, okay, for the policy, it would, don't do this, don't do that type of thing. They started listing all these things. And then they started having conversation that, well, if you're a freshman level course, they shouldn't be able to do this. But if it's 4,000 level, they should. But then in graduate level, it's going to be different and in this type of discipline, et cetera. So then we had a conversation of the difference between policy and practice. So why have an AI policy? So that you can establish the guidelines, right, and the direction, but then within your actual course, you establish the practice. So within this assignment, you can't do this, you can do this, those type of things. But then your policy is more of an overarching view that guides the practice within your courses. And then the obvious reason why I have an AI policy is your university might require it. All right. And this is something that through my readings, through investigations I've been doing, seminars I've been to, et cetera, I've been noticing more and more that the approach has been the university establishes a policy, an AI policy that covers AI across the board, faculty, students, and staff. But then they're asking that our university's done the same thing, that the individual instructors establish it for their course. All right. Because as they're learning, we're all are learning this, is that one size isn't going to fit all, especially when you're talking different disciplines. Within our School of Arts and Sciences, the English department wants to go this direction, but then the Mass Comm department says, oh, no, they need to be using it for all these different pieces. So they're going to have a different approach to it. Okay, so as you're thinking about getting the mindset of establishing your policy, here are just some general questions to think about. We won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but first of all, how do you use AI? Because that's going to affect how you use AI personally and professionally. Is going to affect how you decide to use it within your course, and how you use it within your course is going to decide how you're going to have to establish your policy, all right? And how your students can use it for that matter. But also think about how your students use AI. Now, you notice I didn't say how you think your students use AI. Think about how you know your students use AI. And how do you know that? Do the research first day of class. And we're going to talk later about it, but a survey, have a survey where you actually ask your students, how do you use AI? What type of methods personally and within your studies, those type of things. And then you also get a good feeling from them as far as how they do it, so that when you're talking to them about your policy, you know where they're coming from. Also, consider how AI is viewed on your campus. Our campus, our leadership wants to go into really an AI university. They want this to be known for that. So as we're developing policies within our campus, we have to kind of keep that in mind. Also, how's it viewed in the discipline, in the industry? Again, I think that's really important to know firsthand what's happening in the industry in which your students will be going into. And also think about how you're going to expect the use in your course. So again, how you've developed your course before you start writing your policy for it. And I think this is important here too, to expect, how do you expect your students to use AI in your course? Now, obviously you're going to establish it, right, with what you say they should use it for. But think about the bads that they're going to do as well. And the reason I bring that up is as I was developing a course this summer with the School of Ed, actually a doctor's level course, we had another instructional designer review it for me. One thing she brought up is, hey, there's a lot of writing in this course. I mean, it was every week, 15 weeks, 5 to 7 pages every week, right? And if you're establishing something like that, the students are going to be using AI because of the pressure of that much writing. So if you look at your course and think, okay, how are students going to use it, even if it's not the way I want them to use it? And do I need to change the course in it? Do I need to address that more in my policy? So have those thoughts as you're looking into setting up your course. And then really quick, we've already kind of mentioned this, but I just want to show you as far as others that are going to be affected by your policy. Think about your university. Do they already have an umbrella policy? In this case, this is actually our university's, just the main 11 points of it. And the reason I'm showing that to y'all is because I want you to see that it does address directly faculty, it addresses students, but then within it too, and you're looking at like number 7, number 8, it does give guidelines as well for staff. So this is across the board, the whole university. But as you're thinking about your policy, think about how it affects in there. And also, have you had talks with your department? Or just in some cases, we have disciplines that are considering having a uniform policy that goes across the board, so that as students are going through a program, that the policy within that program is necessarily changing. My suggestion on that, from our experience that we've had and discussions I've had, is that it's going to be better to have a guidelines on the department level. guidelines for the instructors to include, and whether that be, hey, your policy needs to have these different pieces to it, which we'll discuss in a second. And then the instructor actually creates the policy that meets those guidelines. Otherwise, you end up having a university policy, a department policy, and then an instructor policy. A lot of policies. Okay, let's start talking about the actual policy and the meat of it. And I will be showing you examples. So this is more of we're going to start with a broad approach and then go down and narrow it down. So overall, we've got 9 things here. You would want to include how your students may and may not use AI. And with that, one suggestion I would have is that you would specify within that piece of it that for each particular assignment, each specific discussion, project, whatever it is, that you do specify that the details for that one would be within the course. So in other words, for this assignment, this is how you can use AI, this is how you can't use AI, those type of things. Also, within your policy, you do want to address any type of approved or prohibited tools. If there are ones in particular, especially by university policy. One thing we like to point out is within our university, we actually provide subscriptions to Grammarly. So if an instructor is saying no AI at all, they're going to have to address the fact that Grammarly is provided by the school. And so, and that could be, for these assignments, you're not allowed to use Grammarly or those type of things. So those need to be specified within the policy, especially if it's a school provided tool. We're going to show you examples here as far as disclosure and citations and all, so I'll show that in a second. But I would definitely have examples of that so the students can see what you're expecting there. Consequences of misuse. This is most likely going to tie into your academic integrity policy and even link into the school policy there. So we'll show you examples of that. The purpose or rationale for the policy. And this is twofold because you obviously want to, you can't expect students to do something that you don't explain why. And we want to expect that either. And that's also part of the whole growth mindset approach to this. But it's easy to think, okay, I'm going to give rationale why they shouldn't use it. But also, if you're going to incorporate it, you really want them to use in different pieces, you need to give rationale in your policy why it is being used as well. Connect it to the industry. And one reason I say that is because we actually had a professor that gave a AI assignment beginning of this semester, and afterwards gave a survey on it. And every student did the assignment. There's no problems with that. But in the survey, a couple of the students addressed that they were not comfortable using AI. And their reasoning was one was with the environment, one was with workforce. So, legitimate reasons. But it was interesting that she was just kind of shocked that they weren't comfortable because we had this mindset that everyone loves AI and they all want to use it, et cetera. In fact, we had to push them back. But sometimes you have to provide the rationale. So our suggestion is to provide that rationale up front, even for using it as well. So then if you have to have conversations later, it can tie back into that. Give some specific guidance for assignments. I would say if it's large assignments, for instance, like a final exam, I'll show an example with that. Or if you do have a long-term project that you do go ahead and sell in the policy, hey, you're going to be using this AI for this project. Within this, I've been mentioning that, just approaching this, I have a strong belief that within your syllabus, within any type of range that you have within your course, that growth mindset is something that we can project onto our students. And so one way you do that is within your AI policy. And one way to do that within your AI policy is to encourage critical thinking. And to even say that, hey, and that could be within your rationale that we're using this because AI can help us to think critically. And so that kind of brings in that growth mindset. And then within those lines too, actually, one more little piece, a flexibility statement. So, we might think, hey, I could readdress this in a semester for the next semester, my AI policy, no big deal. But I hate to say it, once we get off this call today, it's probably gonna be something new with AI, right? It's gonna be something different, new. So we found that this is just a great idea to put this in here so that if something does change with AI, something else comes up. I mean, the lords of the AI don't wait until the semester to make changes, right? It happens in the most inopportune time. So we suggest having that in there as well. Okay, so I want to give you some examples here. This presentation will be available to you after the sessions today. And this link is also at the end of this presentation here too, but just wanted to show y'all. And am I still sharing the screen?
You are, yes. You're still sharing.
Okay. It's still so we still see the document then?
We do, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Good. Okay, sorry. You never know on this side what's being done. All right. So again, this is actually from our faculty AI guide that we created. And by the way, quick shout out to the SEAL team I work with, our director, Jesse, Gwen, one of the instructional designers, and Casey, instructional designer, and our coordinator, Ed, because they all did all these pieces, right? I'm just the talking head here. But with this, so this faculty guide is a whole guide for our faculty, but this is just a few pages of it. And one thing I want to point out first is as you're developing your guide, your policy, think about the approach, right? So are you you got three, basically we're developing, or we're presenting three items here, three levels rather, and think of a traffic light. And you got red, red, yellow, green. But then you have a traffic light, this has blurred lines, right? Trust me, I'm sure all of y'all have gotten pulled over before and you say, oh, officer, it was pink. It wasn't really red. And so here, the same thing here too. So if you're going with a prohibited, yeah, you can't use AI, don't use ELF or anything. But when you do your research in Google, I know Gemini pops up and it's just kind of like right there. So keep in mind that you might establish within your policy some, even if it's prohibited, some little, clarify some of those blurred lines there. Limited, I think, is the best to start with. You start with the limited, you see our example here, and then you kind of could go on either side of the limited to kind of get more prohibited or more integrated, depending on which direction you want to go. And the thing about limited is that it establishes that, okay, we are going to use AI. We use it for these reasons here, but not for these reasons here. So most of what we see is even people that think they're fully integrated, are actually more on the limited side. And then integrated, wild west, use it for anything. Obviously, you still have some guardrails. So if you use it, make sure you cite it, those type of things. So that's still established within your policy. So let's look at the different types of disclosure here. So again, just like a student would, do research, scholarly research, bring in some academic writing, those type of things. Anything that's not of themselves, they're going to have to disclose where it's coming from. So the formal way, citation, APA. I love it when within a course, an instructor includes actually links to the APA website so they can see exactly how to cite sources. But we definitely encourage that you put an example in your policy for the formal citation there. The use statement, I love to have in connection with the citation. All right. So use statement is really, that to me that's your growth mindset. So that's the idea that they are actually thinking about how did they use AI? Why did they use it? How did it apply? Those type of things. So you can do just a use statement, usually maybe a little bit more low-level assignments, or you could combine it with the formal citation within, say, a formal research paper and what have you. Comments is, again, kind of one more level down as far as formality. And with the comments, again, though, this is a growth mindset type of thing, giving your students that opportunity to critically think. So, for instance, if you have a assignment where they're brainstorming, but then within that, you want them to say, okay, when I did this brainstorming, I actually use this prompt. This is the prompt I use, or these type of things. And they could put it as comments in the Word document that they submit to you. So keep those things in mind there. So, all right, there are several examples here. I'm going to skip down to this middle one right here just because it's the most universal one that we have. And so you're more than welcome to use these examples. I really just wanted to use this to show you the breakdown here. So we have, we're going to say 6 sections. I know it looks like 5, but there's really 6. The first obviously being the policy overview. And just like anything else, you're going to write that probably after you created your policy. Your tool permissions, it has the section of the permitted use and the prohibited use within that. That's where you can specify within a particular assignment, give some of those guidelines. But again, policy versus practice within your actual assignment is when you're going to specify those. Citation example there, again, if you're going to do both citation and disclosure, you could give an example of a disclosure here as well. Rationale, we talked about, the reasoning for it, and then academic integrity. So we implement what we call the liquid syllabus, where there's links and all within their syllabus. So we actually put a link to the academic integrity policy for the university within our syllabus, and for this case, within that policy. So they can link directly to that. So. All right, now I got a few more minutes here. So let's talk about how you're going to talk about this with your students, right? So a lot of this right here, we've already mentioned. You're going to connect it. You're going to, before the fact, right, at the beginning of the course, you're going to connect it to your syllabus. You're going to connect it to your course. You're going to connect the thoughts from it into the discipline and industry. And feel free to even have resources for this within your course as well. The why, we've already talked about, so definitely focus on that. But this is something that I really think that, sometimes you don't want to, but you really need to inform your students how you use AI. All right. We've been having, the news stories in the New York Times of the article where students are saying, hey, you tell me I can't use it to write it, but you can use it to grade it? That doesn't make sense. So be transparent, and by being transparent, you're actually you're basically showing the growth mindset, and you're encouraging communication, because you're telling them, hey, this is how I use it. Now talk to me. Right? Encourage communication, that if they're working an assignment and they're going to use AI, but they're not sure if it falls in the guidelines, that they have the opportunity to reach out to you directly and talk about it. So, because that's going to help you later on if you have to go to the next section, which is the AI use. If they did use it in what would be considered unacceptable use according to your policy, the first thing that I've always suggested is, first of all, don't assume guilt. Talk to the students, get that communication open, and understand their process. And again, this is the growth part. This is the encouraging the growth of the students, understand their process, have them talk to you about it. Now, in some cases, they might say straight up, yep, used it. They might say straight up, hey, you gave us 3 days to do a 10-page paper. I felt the pressure. That might actually open up some eyes for you as far as, what you design your course. And then you determine your next step from there, follow your policy, follow the university's policy with that. All right. And then here, how to present your policy. So you've got this policy, and if you just put it out in the corner, then half the time they're not going to see it, and then you might be upset with that. Hey, they didn't follow the policy. So first of all, I think the obvious one is we put it in our syllabus. We can address it in our course as well, but it's definitely important to talk to students about it. So I helped to design with our English department a lesson that they would, for their 1301, for their composition courses, beginning courses, and a lesson about AI and the technical use of AI. I'll talk about that in a second. But when that came up, the idea of, hey, they could just do this lesson. We don't have to address it in class. We could just see if they did it and that type of thing. What I told them, though, is I said, you need to have a discussion about it. So if it's a face-to-face class, they need to see your face discussing AI, because they see the passion, the emotion of whatever direction it is, and they need to be able to see that, because otherwise, if they just read on a piece of paper, then it's going to be a lot more tempting to, kind of bypass that policy. But they see it from you directly. Now, if you have a asynchronous class, then maybe a video explanation will work as well. Obviously, face-to-face is my favorite. And then along those lines too, a lesson. So I'm really big proponent of this. Like I told you, we developed a lesson within the English department that they've used across their 1301, 1302 courses. We started with a writing that one of the instructors did that is research-based on acceptable versus unacceptable uses of AI in writing in academic setting. And they had to read that. There, he included a podcast. Yes, we use Notebook LM, and included optional other articles to read, a video component of that. But then within all of that, he put in that survey I told you about. So the idea that a survey in which students will express how they use it. And I think that's great information for y'all. Then wrap it up with a quiz, but that quiz had 3 questions. And I'm going to call those acknowledgement questions. Those questions were, I know the difference between acceptable and unacceptable use of AI. I know the AI policy for this course, and I will follow that AI policy. You know who loves that? Those 3 questions? The dean. because then when they have to go to him later on because they use it inappropriately, the dean could say, well, look, that's all that you fill this out. All right, so I feel like I'm rushing to wrap this up. So just want to show you there's a couple of resources here. From the third one on down are articles and all that I've seen. I've not necessarily used within this presentation, but some great articles for you. There is this one here, 5 sample classroom AI policies. I believe one of theirs was the idea of having the students create the policy, which I think is an interesting concept. And the last one here is that podcast I was telling you about. And then the second one down, from heck no to heck yes, creating your AI policy. This article that we've been including, creating resources, not just this article, but lots of others on our website. So you're more than welcome to visit those and see any of our articles if you want to check those out. So that is it. I appreciate y'all bearing with me through this, and love to answer your questions during our next session.